Good evening. I'm Howard K. Smith in Washington.
I'm Harry Reasoner in New York. These are tonight's headlines. The Senate confirms the nomination of Elliot Richardson as Attorney General. The White House says President Nixon is considering ways to answer Watergate questions that were not resolved in yesterday's statement. At the Watergate hearing, James McCord's former attorney says McCord's present attorney told him, quote, "We're going after the President of the United States." And Henry Kissinger, winding up talks with Le Duc in Paris, reports significant progress toward ending Vietnam ceasefire violations. Howard?
Reports tonight from Tom Jarrell on reaction in Washington to President Nixon's latest Watergate statement. Bill Zimmerman on CIA concern over its ties to Watergate. Sam Donaldson on the Senate Watergate Committee's fourth day of open hearings. Stephen Gear on what the Voice of America is telling the rest of the world about the Watergate affair. Jules Bergman on trying to solve the problems of troubled Skylab. And tonight's comment on the President's statement on Watergate. Although still under the gun in the Watergate affair, the Nixon administration scored 2 victories on Capitol Hill today. The Senate confirmed 82-3 the nomination of Elliot Richardson as Attorney General, acting not long after the Senate Judiciary Committee gave Richardson its unanimous approval. And the House of Representatives upheld President Nixon's veto of a bill that would have required Senate confirmation of the President's budget director and his deputy. The House vote was 40 short of the 2/3 needed to beat the President's veto. A White House spokesman said the President was obviously pleased, but the White House mood was not one of jubilation. The major concern is reaction to the President's Watergate statement of yesterday, as ABC's Tom Jarrell reports.
Republican congressional leaders met with the president today to discuss tactics to move legislation on farm matters and the Trans-Alaskan oil pipeline through Congress. But in briefing reporters on those subjects afterward, Senator Scott sensed the overwhelming interest was elsewhere.
I imagine that what we're reporting will have the shortest half-life in press conference history, and you'll probably ignore the whole thing, but now we'll take questions.
The briefing then quickly turned to Watergate. The Republican minority leader showed how the latest presidential report, the third in 3 months, has given supporters of the president some fresh ammunition for a counteroffensive.
At this point, what he has done has clearly reassured the country, and I'm delighted that it's reassuring our foreign representatives over here who have been shaken because they have been led to believe by what they read in the paper that the government is tottering and everything is going to the dogs.
Even so, the president's latest statement is not being applauded by skeptics on Capitol Hill.
Well, once again, the president has not completed, I think, his statement. He made a statement to the nation in April, which was supposed to be it. Now we have a second statement, which is supposed to be it, and when is the third one coming? I think that's a good question.
Since this thing was first revealed, that is Watergate, the president has been trying to go on an installment basis with respect to what he knows and what he does not know. And now he's going into another phase, another installment, and putting us off again.
I would only feel that if we're to get this affair behind us at the earliest possible time, it would be the responsibility of the White House to now volunteer to answer such questions, to answer any and all questions that logically could be posed. Otherwise, we're going to have to pull the truth out, kernel by kernel, through the investigatory process or through the grand jury process, which will take months, sometimes possibly even years. It's better to get it all out now. And this is why I feel the president's statement is helpful, but it would be even more helpful if we would have the whole story out now, once and for all, totally and completely.
The latest Watergate statement, instead of finally resolving the issue, has raised many questions. Again today, presidential spokesman Ronald Ziegler and attorney Lynn Garment took questions from reporters for over an hour. Repeatedly, Ziegler acknowledged that only the president could respond to some key points being raised. We're told he is considering some way of taking direct questions sometime soon. In the meantime, the president struggles with the monumental Watergate problem in private and is only seen keeping routine office appointments, such as receiving his second inaugural medal today from Mrs. Mary Brooks, the director of the Mint. Substantially more of the president's time and energy is being expended on Watergate than the White House would like for it to appear. The latest printed explanation still has not resolved staff morale problems or provided answers which only one man can give. Tom Jarrell, ABC News at the White House.
In his statement yesterday, Mr. Nixon said he had limited the scope of the Watergate investigation because he did not want what he called unrelated matters of national security to become public knowledge. He also said that he had been informed incorrectly that the CIA might be involved in the burglary, and he didn't want that agency compromised by the investigation. On Capitol Hill today, a Senate panel continued its hearings into possible CIA involvement in Watergate. ABC's Bill Zimmerman reports.
Acting Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Stuart Symington has spent nearly 2 weeks looking into the CIA connection with the Watergate.
Well, have you seen anything in the documents that have come through your committee pertaining to the Watergate investigation, which, if disclosed, would damage national security, in your opinion?
Yes.
You have?
Yes. Quite a little.
So it was important.
But I've also seen, as I said in my little statement, I've seen some things that when someone said it would be more national embarrassment than national security, I couldn't agree more. And the thrust of what I'm trying to say is that I don't want to see information which the public should have that could create national embarrassment, not released to the public under the guise of its effect on national security.
Symington's committee met again today with CIA Director James Schlesinger, and Schlesinger said White House aides Ehrlichman and Haldeman went too far in interpreting what the president now says his instructions were, to limit the Watergate investigation for reasons of national security.
He said, don't violate national security. Let out what you can, but don't violate national security. He now says that his aides interpreted that so that they didn't let out anything.
I think that that may be a little bit strong, but I think that they were at least overzealous in the interpretation of his instructions.
Also back on the Hill today was Deputy CIA Director Vernon Walters testifying before John McClellan's Appropriations Subcommittee on Intelligence. Like other agency officials, Walters is concerned about the CIA's integrity.
Do you feel the CIA's effectiveness has been reduced as a result of all these disclosures?
I would hope for the sake of the United States that it is not.
Walters and other CIA officials continue to look like good guys in the Watergate affair for refusing to buckle under White House pressure. But so far, only agency men have testified. Others will begin tomorrow. Bill Zimmerman, ABC News, Capitol Hill.
This was the fourth day of the Senate Watergate hearings, and it produced a new sensation. The former attorney of star witness James McCord flatly contradicted important elements of McCord's testimony, then went on to make a charge of his own. ABC's Sam Donaldson reports.
Gerald Alch, McCord's former attorney, said he was sorry it had come to this, that he and McCord had had a close and friendly relationship. But to put it bluntly, McCord had not told the senators the truth about him. For instance, Alch told the committee he had merely asked McCord whether the CIA was involved in Watergate, not tried to get him to testify to that effect, as McCord claimed.
I did not, after advising other defense counsel of Mr. McCord's denial of CIA involvement, engage with other counsel in any further conversation of any potential defense involving the CIA. At no time did I suggest to Mr. McCord that the so-called CIA defense be utilized, for the defense of duress had already been agreed upon, but I merely asked him whether or not there was a factual basis for this contention. Mr. McCord's allegation that I announced my ability to forge his CIA personnel records with the cooperation of the then acting CIA director, Mr. Schlesinger, is absurd and completely untrue.
Alch also denied McCord's story that he had once passed on a message to McCord asking him who he would believe on an offer of executive clemency. As Alch read from his statement, McCord and his new attorney, Bernard Fensterwald, entered the caucus room and sat listening. McCord was visibly agitated and told reporters he was asking to go before the committee and call Alch a liar. Suddenly, it was Fensterwald's turn to get upset. As he heard Alch testify about a telephone conversation Alch said he had with Fensterwald last April.
In one of these conversations, he said to me, quote, This is Mr. Finsterwald talking. What do you think of all that's going on? Referring to the disclosures being made by Mr. McCord to this honorable committee. I replied, whatever is right for Jim McCord is all right with me. Mr. Finsterwald replied, and I quote, we're going after the President of the United States. I replied that I was not interested in any vendettas against the President, but only in the best interest of my client. To which Mr. Finsterwald replied, well, you'll see, that's who we're going after, the President, unquote.
When Alch finished his statement, Chairman Irvin adjourned the hearings until tomorrow, leaving Finsterwald and McCord no platform but the one offered by reporters outside in the hallway. Mr. Finsterwald, I think the most serious allegation made there was that you told Mr. Alch that you were trying to get the President.
No, that's not true, but I'm not going to comment on Mr. Alch's statement at this time. We made a request of Senator Irvin to appear briefly when Mr. Alch got through to correct what we think are some errors in the record, and we're not at all sure that we'll get that opportunity, but we did make the request that we be able to answer questions briefly tomorrow.
You did not tell Mr. Alch that you were out to get the President then?
That is correct.
Why do you think Mr. Alch testified as he did so today, testimony which you have said is a lie?
I'm sure he wants to get his word in answer to my statement.
On his own motion, or do you think he's working for other people?
I have no idea.
Were you out to get the President, Mr. McCord?
No.
The main question that was being asked of you, or the question that was raised in this long testimony by Mr. Alch, was a suggestion that you had motives other than your own freedom, that you became involved in some great new conspiracy, this time to bring down President Nixon. Could you make a comprehensive statement about that?
I've asked for an opportunity to appear before the committee again in rebuttal, and I'll go into it as fully as I'm able at that time.
Tomorrow, the committee will consider McCord's request to appear in rebuttal to Alch. The odds are it will not allow him to do so, at least not at this time. As one staff member put it, we've already heard McCord's version. And who to believe? That is a question that now goes beyond the specific points in dispute. For if the committee believes Alch's report that McCord's new lawyer is out to get the President, then McCord's total credibility is seriously weakened. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, in the caucus room on Capitol Hill.
From CBS News headquarters in New York, this is the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. James McCord's first lawyer today accused the convicted Watergate conspirator and his second lawyer of waging a vendetta against President Nixon. The charge came in testimony at the Senate's Watergate hearing. Daniel Shore reports.
McCord was to take a more dramatic turn this afternoon, but this morning the emphasis was still on the men who conveyed the offer of clemency to him.
In my mind, I felt that the President probably did know about it. Now I'm going out the door to become more specific. And it crossed my mind that this conceivably was for the President. I believed it. I had to think about that. And based upon all of that background, I believed I was doing something for the President of the United States. And I did it, sir.
Mr. Caulfield, am I to conclude from your responses to Senator Weicker that you are aware that you were involved in a criminal act of obstructing criminal investigations?
Yes, sir. Former New York policeman Anthony Ulasovich, friend of Caulfield, told of serving as his intermediary in 3 phone conversations with McCord. And Senator Baker took the opportunity to get his professional evaluation of the Watergate bugging operation.
No retired man in the New York City Police Department would be coming involved in a thing like that. And if he thought he had to, for whatever reason it was, he wouldn't have walked in with an army. That's for sure. to work, walked in with an army, would he have walked in with identification papers and serially numbered $100 bills and an address book? He would have probably walked in like any decent, common-looking citizen, laid something in the right place and walked right out, and that would have been the end of it for a long time. How could you? Well, they say you must be honest here, Senator. Yeah, how could...
But it was McCord's former lawyer, Gerald Alch, who brought today's session to a climax, challenging McCord's version of the role he'd played. Alch denied ever urging McCord to plead guilty. He conceded once asking McCord if the CIA had been involved in the Watergate operation, but said he never considered using such a claim in court, having already decided on another defense.
At no time did I suggest to Mr. McCord that the so-called CIA defense be utilized, for the defense of duress had already been agreed upon, but I merely asked him whether or not there was a factual basis for this contention. Mr. McCord's allegation that I announced my ability to forge his CIA personnel records with the cooperation of the then acting CIA director, Mr. Schlesinger, is absurd and completely untrue.
Far from trying to sell McCord on the hope of executive clemency, said Alch, he never believed it would be granted. It was Howard Hunt's lawyer, William Bittman, said Alch, who speculated to him on the idea that the defendants might be released at Christmas time.
I mentioned this to Mr. McCord in a most skeptical manner and said to him, Jim, it can be Christmas, Easter, and Thanksgiving all rolled into one. But in my opinion, the president will not touch this case with a 10-foot pole, so don't rely on any prospect of executive clemency. Mr. McCord laughed and agreed with me. That was the only occasion that the words executive clemency were ever mentioned by me to my client.
Alch raised the issue of the role of McCord's new lawyer, Bernard Fensterwald. McCord entered the hearing room to listen as Alch told the Fensterwalds helping McCord raise $100,000 bail before even meeting him, then working with McCord on his charges of cover-up before Judge Sirica and the Senate committee. Alch said he talked on the phone to Fensterwald about the reason for McCord's sudden new course.
Mr. Fensterwald replied, and I quote, "We're going after the President of the United States." I replied that I was not interested in any vendettas against the President.
You did not tell Mr. Alch that you were out to get the President then?
That is correct.
Did Mr. Alch tell Mr. McCord, or did he not, that the CIA records of his employment could be doctored?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did. Is that your answer?
Did.
So Mr. Alch is lying, Mr. McCord.
I'm stating Mr. Alch told me exactly what you've just asked me.
Mr. McCord, why do you think, Mr. Alch, and if we could move you up so that you could be seen, why do you think Mr. Alch testified as he did so today, testimony which you have said is a lie?
I'm sure he wants to get his word in answer to my statement.
On his own motion, or do you think he's working for other people?
I have no idea.
Were you out to get the President, Mr. McCord?
No.
Chairman Irvin is not disposed to let McCord come right back to the stand tomorrow and may ask him to submit a written rebuttal. But McCord, who's been making a lot of charges lately, now has one implied charge to answer himself, that he's been made part of some operation to damage President Nixon. Daniel Shaw, CBS News, in the Senate caucus room in Washington.
Good evening. On the program tonight, we'll see Henry Kissinger in Paris talking about his latest meeting with the North Vietnamese. We'll be going to Texas for a story on the shortage of natural gas. We'll have excerpts of the Senate Watergate hearings, some reaction to President Nixon's latest statement on Watergate, and an interview with Robert Vesco, the millionaire financier who is wanted by the New York City police.
The news begins tonight with the fact that Elliot Richardson is our new Attorney General. After considerable delay, the Senate Judiciary Committee unanimously okayed him this afternoon, and a few hours later, he was confirmed by the Senate. The vote was 82-3. This means that Archibald Cox will now be able to go to work as the special prosecutor in the Watergate scandals. The Senate Watergate hearings continued today, again on television across the country. The chief witness was John Caulfield, who admitted again that he told Watergate burglar James McCord that he would be released from jail by President Nixon if he would agree to keep quiet. At the time, Caulfield was working in the White House.
I felt very strongly about the president, extremely strongly about the president. I was very loyal to his people that I work for. I place a high value upon loyalty. Now, out of the blue, I'm injected into this scandal. I'm being asked by one of my former superiors to deliver a message that I know to be executive clemency. I tried to avoid it, as my statement indicates. I imposed upon my friend to do it, hoping that all parties would be satisfied. I was not successful. I was brought back in again to it, now being asked to see Mr. McCord directly. I did go to see him. Now I'm becoming further implicated into this matter. I have this conversation with John Dean, who's the counsel to the president. I've been there 3 years. I know what the relations are and how they exist. I make certain judgments based upon those relationships. In my mind, I felt that the president probably did know about it. But what I'm saying to you, sir, that my loyalties, and especially to the President of the United States, overrided those considerations.
A squabble developed at the hearings today. James McCord, the former CIA employee who was caught in the Watergate, has testified that his lawyer proposed a cover-up plan to him, that he should blame the CIA, not the committee, to re-elect the president for the Watergate burglary. Today, the lawyer, Gerald Alch, testified indignantly that McCord was not telling the truth.
Mr. McCord has made accusations directed towards many men. I am in no position to judge his credibility in that regard. I do, however, have first-hand knowledge of his relationship with me, and in regard to his accusations against me, he is not telling the truth. As I watched Mr. McCord on national television on May 18, 1973, and listened to him falsely accuse me of professional misconduct, which accusations are false in every respect, I immediately and vividly recalled his praise for me throughout the trial, his confidence expressed to me at the time of the guilty verdict, and his further expression of gratitude during the period of his incarceration. And I asked myself, what kind of a man is this?
McCord heard part of Alch's testimony this afternoon, and when the hearing ended, he walked out of the hearing room into a covey of reporters.
Repeat the question. The question is, did Mr. Alch tell Mr. McCord, or did he not, that the CIA records of his employment could be doctored?
Yes, he did.
Yes, he did. Is that your answer?
Did.
So Mr. Alch is lying, Mr. McCord.
I'm stating Mr. Alch told me exactly what you've just asked me.
Mr. McCord,
Why do you think, Mr. Alch, and if we could move you...
This afternoon, the director of Central Intelligence, James Schlesinger, told reporters that no one had ever approached him with a scheme to assist McCord in a cover-up or to doctor his retirement records to show that McCord had rejoined the CIA. But we did learn something interesting from the testimony today, that the White House did have a line of communication to the lawyers who were defending the Watergate burglars. And we know that the White House had a line of communication to the government lawyers who were prosecuting them, so the White House was able to talk then to both sides. Everyone here in Washington today was talking about the statement on the Watergate cover-up issued yesterday by the president. Congressmen, foreign ambassadors, and newsmen. There was practically no other topic of conversation. This morning at the White House, Congressman Gerald Ford and Senator Hugh Scott, both supporters of the president, had this to say.
All of us felt that the president's statement had been forthright, was categorical, it was strong. It dealt subject by subject with his own honest recollection. I will say that I talked last night to 5 ambassadors. I had not expected to see them. I made the statement to them I make to you now. This government is strong. This government will be stronger tomorrow than it is today, and stronger next month than it was last month. The president is strong and of good heart and high purpose.
I believe the president had no knowledge whatsoever of the Watergate affair. He had no personal knowledge of any alleged cover-up, and I believe the American people believe that.
Despite the optimistic line taken by the Republican leaders, the president's statement did not satisfy many members of Congress. While everyone welcomed the new disclosures, some felt the president had raised more questions than he answered. There also were suggestions Mr. Nixon still is not telling everything he knows.
The basic issue in Watergate is he knew or should have known that the CIA had no connection. All he had to do is call Mr. Helms or the deputy director of CIA on the telephone and say, are there any of your people involved in Watergate, period? And the answer, of course, was no.
I don't think that national security should be used in any sense as a reason for not explaining some of the things that apparently were motivated by people like Mr. Haldeman and Mr. Ehrlichman and Mr. Dean. And I'm not saying, and I don't know whether or not they did it with approval of higher authority, but I do know that there's a lot that's come to us that looks strictly political, and there's also a lot that's come to us which, if released, would affect national security. That's the problem.
But Simonton said he is convinced on the basis of his own investigation that the White House fears national embarrassment more than any breach of national security. Paul Duke, NBC News at the Capitol.
One of the disclosures in yesterday's statement by the president indicates the manner in which the White House operated on its own. Mr. Nixon says he tried to set up expanded intelligence operations to be used domestically in this country, which would have included illegal burglaries. He says that this White House effort, a presidential effort, was blocked by the late J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI. That in itself is a curiosity, Hoover blocking the president. The president says further that after Hoover blocked this plan for more domestic intelligence operations, the president himself set up a White House investigative group known only to the White House, not to the Justice Department or the FBI. And people from that group, without his knowledge, says the president, burgled the office of Daniel Ellsberg's doctor. Some of the same people later had a connection with the Watergate burglary, which raises a question which is being asked. Did the White House intend to go into the burglary business without telling anyone in the U.S. government?
In his Watergate statement, President Nixon referred to undercover FBI operations which had been stopped 7 years ago. He indicated the operations involved foreign intelligence, but did not elaborate. Neil Strasser has learned more about this.
Sources familiar with operations of the FBI explained that the president was referring to so-called black bag jobs, FBI break-ins at embassies or missions of foreign countries. The activities had continued for years prior to 1966. The general purpose was to seek evidence of espionage, but codes were apparently also obtained. The sources say the break-ins were few in number, that the FBI was never caught at it, that the operations were carried out so smoothly that the embassies involved never realized there had been a break-in. It was Ramsey Clark who put a stop to such activity when he became Attorney General. Clark tells CBS News that he had no knowledge of previous operations, but does recall turning down an FBI request to authorize a break-in of a foreign interest, probably in New York. His argument was that such illegal activity, if discovered, could taint any case brought under the espionage laws. Sources say it was an argument accepted and repeated by J. Edgar Hoover in refusing to go along with President Nixon's plan to resume, in 1970, what had been suspended in 1966. Neil Strauser, CBS News, Washington.
Post reports that former White House aide Charles Colson and two law partners plan to use his White House leverage to influence the promotion to a key post of a Securities and Exchange Commission official. The newspaper quotes a memo from one of the partners as saying, "This is one of the chips we really should pick up because it is a key job in the commission and one of extreme importance to us in representing our clients." The account said that Colson had written on the memo that he thought an official at the White House, quote, "could lock this up for us." The SEC post has not yet been filled, and UPI says it has learned that the hand-picked lawyer will not get it. In Montreal today, officials said there is an arrest warrant out for the Canadian partner of elusive New Jersey financier Robert Vesco. They said Norman LeBlanc is wanted on charges involving accountability for $107 million now frozen in the Bank of Montreal. LeBlanc, however, was in Costa Rica issuing a statement that said disclosure of details that led to the resignation of G. Bradford Cook as chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission would startle the world. Vesco has been indicted along with John Mitchell and Marie Stans on charges that they obstructed an investigation into a $200,000 contribution to Mr. Nixon's campaign. Vesco, too, was in Costa Rica today. He surfaced briefly for the first time since that indictment. He denied the charges, said he has renounced his U.S. citizenship. At a news conference, Vesco was asked if he would return to the United States to face a fugitive warrant.
There are two conditions of which I will go back. One is if a special prosecutor is appointed, which I understand there has been one, and I hope that he will have total jurisdiction over the, quote, Watergate situation. In which case I would be prepared to cooperate with them under certain circumstances. The experience we've had over the last 2.5 years are such that we would want to make the ground rules extremely clear and would not want to be exposed to additional type harassing and litigation that we've had.
There's an implication that you might feel that your life is in danger. Is that correct?
Well, both you gentlemen have traveled to Latin America often enough that you've been exposed to the thinking of the Latin Americans vis-a-vis the U.S. and the CIA, and I would not discard that as a real possibility.
From the CIA?
Sure.
How about Latin American revolutionaries, less extremists?
Well, we've not found anything in the Latin American revolutionaries that can begin to approach the audacity or the viciousness that we have with the U.S. agencies.
Mr. Vesco, U.S. agencies, you mean the CIA, sir?
Well, we've kind of put them all together.
If you had it to do all over again, Mr. Vesco, would you make a contribution to the committee to re-elect President Nixon?
I think that question is self-evident, the answer to that. Of course not.
You are or were a Republican. Are you still a supporter of President Nixon?
I would say that I am.
In an 82-3 vote, Elliot Richardson won Senate confirmation today as Attorney General. Fred Graham reports.
With the confirmation of Richardson, the Senate firmly reestablished its constitutional duty to advise as well as consent to the President's cabinet nominations. President Nixon had nominated Elliot Richardson with a mandate to select a special Watergate prosecutor if he wished. But the Senate made it clear from the first that it would not accept Richardson unless he named a fully independent special prosecutor. During the 3 weeks of proceedings before the Judiciary Committee, Richardson struggled to keep his hand in the Watergate case while backing down almost day by day. The final step came when Richardson picked Harvard Law professor Archibald Cox as a special prosecutor, with full authority, if required, to follow the trail to the President's Oval Office. Senate Democratic Whip Robert Byrd explained today why he then urged the Democrats to vote yes.
There are some doubts in my mind that I have difficulty in resolving, but I think in view of the fact that we have, that time is fleeting, that we almost have to approve this choice. In the first place, Mr. Richardson has named a very reputable special prosecutor. In the second place, Mr. Richardson has formulated a charter of guidelines, reworked them, revised them, and refined them under great pressure from the committee members in public and in private. And I think that we have a good set of guidelines.
So Elliot Richardson becomes the 67th Attorney General of the United States, but with no authority in the important Watergate matter. Fred Graham, CBS News, Washington.
The Russian news media usually like to play up any matter of possible embarrassment to the U.S., but this has not been so with Watergate. Today, for example, the Soviet news agency TASS carried only a short summary of President Nixon's latest Watergate statement, giving prominence to the president's denial that he knew of bugging plans and without editorial comment. All of this is apparently an effort to avoid embarrassing the president in advance of Soviet Party Chief Brezhnev's coming visit to Washington. Ironically, Russians who are interested can find a good deal more about Watergate from an organ of the U.S. federal government, the Voice of America. ABC's Stephen Gear reports.
The Voice of America broadcasts more than 900 hours of programming each week in 36 languages. More than half of those broadcasts are news programs. One might think that Watergate wouldn't get a mention, but such is not the case.
В специальном Сенатском комитете продолжается допрос свидетелей по делу Watergate.
In this Russian language broadcast, as in each of 35 other languages, Watergate is the lead story and gets full play. VOA officials say great effort is made to report Watergate fully and accurately. And they say there has been no comment, no criticism from the White House or elsewhere in the executive branch. There have been a few unfavorable comments from Capitol Hill about broadcasts detrimental to the image of the United States, but VOA's Deputy Director William Miller says truth is beneficial.
We consider that the impact of telling the truth over a long period of time will benefit the United States. Therefore, we can't duck any major story, no matter what it is, no matter whether it puts us in a bad light or a good light. Secondly, if we don't tell it, somebody else will tell it. Even though the Soviets are not telling their own people the full story of Watergate, other international broadcasters are broadcasting into the Soviet Union and are telling their versions of this story. So I think it's important that we strive to be as accurate in reporting it as possible.
This newscast is beamed to Europe and the Middle East, where dinner hour listeners hear about Watergate.
With the news in detail, here again is Chris Core.
Former White House aide John Caulfield has testified that he believed the offer of executive clemency he transmitted to Watergate burglar James McCord came from President Nixon.
Most VOA staffers with whom we spoke expressed a feeling of pride over the agency's Watergate coverage, although some expressed the feeling that there has been pressure to tone down reports, pressure from the agency, USIA. One VOA official who talked with pride of the coverage said all along he has half expected a phone call saying he is the president. So far, it hasn't come. Stephen Gear, ABC News at the Voice of America in Washington.
The Democrats are continuing to take depositions in their civil suits against the Nixon Re-Election Committee. Yesterday, H.R. Haldeman made a deposition, and he frequently invoked executive privilege. But today, John Ehrlichman made his deposition, and he answered every question. The difference appears to be the president's statement yesterday on executive privilege, and John Cochran has that story.
This was Ehrlichman's second day to face the Democrats' lawyers, but it was the first day President Nixon's new guidelines were in effect, forbidding the use of executive privilege to avoid testifying about possible crimes. Ehrlichman later said the Democrats did ask questions about his relationship with the president.
Mr. Ehrlichman, did you indeed have to invoke executive privilege?
No, we haven't invoked any kind of privilege this morning, except the privilege to go to lunch now, and we'll be back this afternoon. Executive privilege hasn't come up, I don't believe.
No, I've had no occasion to have it come up since the president's speech yesterday.
In transcript. The Democrats' top lawyer said Ehrlichman was more candid today than H.R. Haldeman was yesterday.
So far, you find Mr. Ehrlichman to be a helpful witness.
He's attempting to answer our questions.
And would you so characterize Mr. Haldeman?
Mr. Haldeman appeared to be operating yesterday under different guidelines, and executive privilege was invoked any number of occasions. In the light of the new guidelines, we may, more than likely will, request Mr. Haldeman to come back and explore those areas again.
The Democrats aren't finished with Ehrlichman either. He'll be back tomorrow. John Cochran, NBC News, Washington.
The president's statement yesterday was logical and persuasive, casting a helpful light on the mess he's responsible for, but its very helpfulness leaves the citizen uneasy. It is the latest in a succession of statements, each one admitting a little more complicity, once denied altogether. We're forced to think that future revelations may produce further admissions, and that we would know none of what we now know had not the press been so provocative. This reporter in this space has given presidents the benefit of doubts often, not only this president, but past ones. That's because only there do I see hopes of initiatives to make our nation work. Congress is a poor instrument for action, negative, dilatory, interest-ridden, with some peculiar moral notions of its own. The hero of the moment, Sam Ervin, for example, believes in the Constitution devoutly for whites only. Not my ideal as a protector of rights. He has opposed every civil rights law. But if the Senate is, as one called the Senate, a sapless branch of government, the executive is now a cracked branch. We need investigation of Watergate and all the facts. But what we need more is a sign from our government that the American disease, political corruption in federal and state and city government, is going to be stopped. You don't need a presidential commission debating for 2 years to find out what to do. You can write down what's wrong and what has to be done on the back of an envelope in 5 minutes. A tough, enforced code of ethics and a dam to stop special interest money pouring into politics. I regret to say that I see little sign of that now. Harry?
Thank you, Howard. That's tonight's news and a comment. I'm Harry Reasoner. Good night.
Anthony Ulasewicz is a retired New York cop who did various clandestine jobs for the White House, paid for by the Nixon campaign contributions. At the Watergate hearings today, Ulasewicz produced one of the few funny moments when he got into a dialogue with Senator Howard Baker about wiremen, experts in electronic eavesdropping, and about James McCord, a wireman who was caught in the Watergate along with 4 other burglars.
Better than McCord's wireman?
Well, I tell you, there would no retired man in the New York City Police Department would be coming involved in a thing like that. And if he thought he had to, for whatever reason it was, he wouldn't have walked in with an army. That's for sure.
He wouldn't have walked in with an army. Would he have walked in with identification papers and serially numbered $100 bills and an address book?
He would have probably walked in like any decent, common-looking citizen, laid something in the right place and walked right out, and that would have been the end of it for a long time.
How could you?
Well, they say you must be honest here, Senator.
Yeah,
right?
how could...
And the politicians are most vulnerable people in the world, in my experience in the last 3 years, to any kind of scandal, et cetera, and et cetera.
Well,
I don't say they're guilty of it, because I still have to come back here. But because of the type.
The last thing on earth I'd want to do is to convert your testimony into self-serving purposes for this committee. But you don't have any good wiremen on us, do you?
It looks like there's plenty of them here.
NBC News will continue its live television coverage of the Senate Watergate hearings tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time. Thank you and good night for NBC News.
In conclusion, perhaps it would help you to have a little progress report on these extraordinary hearings. The committee scheduled 8 days of hearings, 5 in May and 3 in June, for what's being called the first round. 22 witnesses, including some of the once most powerful men in the Nixon administration, were scheduled to testify. Well, today we're halfway through those 8 days, and so far only 4 of the 22 scheduled witnesses have appeared. 5 others who have testified have been forced in by the pressure of unfolding facts. That means it's very unlikely that the committee will complete its first round on schedule, especially considering the heavyweight witnesses to come. They will either have to schedule more days after the Memorial Day recess or stretch further on into June. At the same time, despite its impeccable presentation and efficient management, the committee's not been able to keep the story very tidy. Increasingly, it becomes like one of those old-fashioned novels where the plot gets interrupted every time a new character turns up and wants to tell his life story. To date, adding up the main plots and subplots, Watergate might have even a novelist like Tolstoy confused. It now appears to involve not only the White House, the Justice Department, the CIA, the FBI, the SEC, the Committee to Re-elect the President, an employee of the Treasury Department, but now a mess of federal prosecutors and defense attorneys all struggling to save their own reputations. And if that isn't confusion enough, we'll probably be able to improve on it tomorrow. For Jim Lehrer and Peter Kay.
Meantime, he's winding up his work at the Pentagon, and Bob Schieffer reports.
Richardson was Secretary of Defense just 90 days when the president tapped him to become Attorney General, his third cabinet post in 5 months. Meeting with Pentagon reporters today, he said one of his main jobs at the Justice Department will be to restore confidence in law enforcement. Watergate, he said, has infected things with a kind of sleaziness. He expects no general house cleaning at Justice, but he says there will be changes. Richardson was at the Pentagon such a short time, it's difficult to judge his impact there. He'll probably be remembered for the one thing he'd just as soon forget, the fact that he was the Secretary of Defense who had to close most of the military bases in Massachusetts, his home state. Asked today what he thought he'd accomplished in his short stay at the Pentagon, Richardson replied, really not a hell of a lot. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, Washington.
Maryland Republican Congressman William Mills apparently shot himself today, less than a week after public attention was focused on a secret campaign contribution to him from the Nixon Re-Election Committee. Barry Sarafin reports from Easton, Maryland.
A caretaker at a farm outside of Easton, Maryland, where Mills kept horses, heard a shot at 7 o'clock this morning. In the barn, he found Mills' body, a gunshot wound in the chest. There, too, a 12-gauge shotgun and a single spent shell. Washington associates, asked about Mills' apparent suicide, said he'd been worried that the undisclosed $25,000 contribution would be associated with Watergate, that he was upset about newspaper stories on the subject, that he hated bad publicity and was even considering resigning. Interior Secretary Rogers Morton, for whom Mills served as an administrative assistant and then succeeded in Congress, set up the campaign payment through then Attorney General John Mitchell and the Finance Committee to re-elect the president.
There's nothing improper about them putting funds and support into a congressional campaign.
And you found nothing unusual about the manner in which it was done?
No, the only unusual element in the manner in which it was done was that John Mitchell made it pretty clear to me it was a loan and that I'd better help raise some money so that it would be paid back in that sense.
Did John Mitchell make it clear to you that these funds were not part of any type of secret fund?
Well, we never discussed that because they weren't any. I mean, it was the Stans committee. It was a committee which was operating in the full light of day.
The last public statement Congressman Mills made regarding the campaign contribution was late yesterday to radio station WEMD in Easton.
I wish to assure everyone that I have done nothing improper. I make it clear that I personally did not receive or disperse any money during my campaigns. This is the proper role for a candidate.
Various sources say Congressman Mills left suicide notes. What those notes said is not known. And it is not known whether his tragic death was related to the campaign financing reports. But what one of his acquaintances calls the unfortunate timing of his death has left that impression even among his friends and defenders. Barry Sarafin, CBS News, Easton, Maryland.
The Skylab astronauts are to be launched tomorrow, and here is Walter Cronkite's report from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida.
On the surface, all is going smoothly for one of the most remarkable exploits in America's manned space program, the effort to send up a crew to repair the crippled Skylab and then stay aboard for 28 days of scientific research. Although there are thunderstorms on the Cape area this afternoon, the weather is supposed to be satisfactory tomorrow morning. The countdown on target for launch at 9 o'clock. Our coverage at CBS News to begin on the CBS Morning News at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. But even if they get off on the mark, the astronauts Pete Conrad, Dr. Joseph Kerwin, and Paul Weitz are going to be 10 days behind schedule. That's because of the accident moments after Skylab's launch here a week ago Monday that ripped away a heat shield and crippled the Space Lab's power plant. The heat problem apparently is more crucial than that power shortage, and what must be done is to erect a sunshade over the Skylab. Now, an umbrella device is going to be pushed through a small opening in Skylab, and then the umbrella deployed, opened up, and lowered down for a 22 by 24-foot cover here. Then, toward the end of the mission, Conrad and Kerwin, working outside the Skylab, will erect a longer-lasting shade for the following missions. With me here is William Schneider, the director of the Skylab program. I'm wondering, Mr. Schneider, why all the rush? It does seem that this has moved along a lot faster than most such things in the space program. Things don't seem to be being checked out as thoroughly as we're used to it in the past. The training of the astronauts have been really just a few days, only one day in that nearly zero-gravity tank in Huntsville. Why the rush? Won't that Skylab wait up there where we train these fellows a little better?
Well, in the first place, we really do think we are ready to go. The vehicle right now is in what I classify as a controlled status. That is, it's not stable. It doesn't stay in any one condition by itself. The flight controllers in Houston and with the technical experts from Marshall are having to continually alter the orientation of the vehicle so that we can control the various temperatures. It's a very delicate balance between thermal balance and electrical power and attitude control, and they're continually having to change the vehicle. So we'd like to get up there as soon as we are ready, and we now think we are ready. I'd like to assure you that we haven't cut any corners. All of our documentation is there. We've examined all of the materials, make sure that everything is right, and we have trained properly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schneider. So the launch team is confident. They predict that the shield will be erected all right, the temperature controlled, and a full 28-day mission flown. This is Walter Cronkite, CBS News, the Kennedy Space Center.
Some of the nation's largest banks, with Chase Manhattan leading the way, today boosted their prime lending rate from 7 to 7.25%. It was the fifth such hike this year. Chase and other banks indicated their increases are linked to recent actions by the Federal Reserve Board to tighten the nation's money supply. The increases are not expected to raise interest rates on consumer and small business loans. The Nixon administration hasn't had much good economic news to report lately, but trade figures released today were so promising that Commerce Secretary Dent announced them himself 24 hours early. Dent said that in April, exports exceeded imports for the first time in 18 months, leaving the U.S. with a trade surplus of more than $196 million. The trade report helped today in sending the Dow Jones Industrials up more than 29 points on the New York Stock Exchange. It was the largest gain in the Dow since August 16, 1971, the day after Phase 1 started. Volume today was 17,300,000 shares. The average price per share gained $1.06 on the New York Exchange, 14 cents on the American. Second high-level British government official resigned today in the midst of what is being called the biggest sex scandal in Britain since the Profumo affair. Bill Plant reports from London.
It all had a vaguely familiar ring about it. Lord Jellicoe, shown here in the business suit in this recent footage, leader of the House of Lords for Britain's ruling Conservative Party, resigned after admitting to what he termed casual affairs with call girls. It was just 10 years ago that John Profumo resigned from the cabinet after his relationship with a model by the name of Christine Keeler was exposed. But there is one big difference. Profumo at first lied to the House. Jellicoe apparently offered the information as soon as he was asked. Another peer, Lord Lambton, a junior official in the cabinet, resigned on Tuesday after attempts were made to blackmail him with photographs made in this luxury apartment in London's Maida Vale section, apparently the residence of a call girl. A grim Prime Minister Heath emerged from a cabinet meeting earlier today to assure Parliament that no other ministers or public servants were involved. and that there had been no breach of the national security, something with which the government had been very concerned after the Profumo affair 10 years ago. Rush hour passers-by, asked if this could be compared to the Watergate, saw little in common for the scandals, save two embarrassed governments.
I should say that the Watergate affair is a much more serious affair. I think it's much more indicative of a state of corruption in the United States. I think it'll probably prove that the allegations against British ministers aren't as serious as those against the American politicians.
This follows a pattern of empires declining, you know. You've got your Romans, you've got your Spain, and there again, look at Profumo, and now you've got it with somebody else, you know. Sex in high places, violence. Look at the football matches over here. But that same old thing again, with sexual scandals in royalty and things like that. It's part of the pattern. It's part of the pattern, right from history, you know, the crumbling down. But as far as Watergate goes, nothing, never, no, really. And you're just a young country to go yet. You've got to have this. I mean, in about 500 years' time, you might be able to draw a comparison, but not now.
With newspapers hinting that other important figures could still be involved, the Prime Minister has promised a continuing investigation. Bill Plant, CBS News, London.
That's the news this Thursday night. This is Roger Mudd, CBS News. Good night.